All right, so we're right at the top of the hour here at 11 a.m., so we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. This is a modeling and reinforcing made simple style webinar where we're going to go over some of the features that have been added or enhanced. I'd like to introduce myself. I am Travis Shelton. I'm the product manager for ASA. I've been in the industry for about 22 plus years, working for a large fabricator in the state of Florida before switching over to ASA. I am an active member of both CRSI and ACI technical type committees, and part of the BIM 131 committee for ACI. We also have Kirk Poolen who's joining us, and I'm going to let Kirk introduce himself.
Greetings, everybody. As Travis mentioned, my name is Kirk Poolen. I'm an application engineer and I work for Bentley Systems. I've been working with Pro Structures and more specifically the Pro Concrete side of the application since about 2014. And during that time, I was actually working for CMC, or Commercial Metals Company, as the regional BIM specialist for the central region. And worked using the software on live projects and kind of getting a feel for it and learning how to use it the best that I can there, and then applying that now in my day-to-day at Bentley to help improve the application and experience for all the detailers out there.
I appreciate that, Kirk. So during this webinar, what we're going to be going through is both Kirk and I are going to do some presenting. It is a live webinar. I am going to be completely transparent with everyone. This is our first time using the Teams live events, and hopefully all the links have worked that I've sent out, because I was getting some emails back saying that some folks were having issues. So I'm glad to see that they've made it on. So this is our first shot at the Teams live event. So I'll apologize in advance if I push the wrong buttons and something goes a little squirrely on it, but I, again, just want to be completely transparent with you. This is a live demo, live webinar. But what we're going to be going through during this webinar is we are going to be looking at some of the beam macro type enhancements. I'll be showing that first, and then I'll be moving into the parametric cell enhancements, which is actually a really nice feature. And it's something that, you know, we've been after for a little while, and we finally have. So I want to make sure we show that. We're also going to move into an overview of the component center, and that is something off of the Bentley website that Kirk's going to go over. And then Kirk's going to also do an overview of some of the updates from the schedule generator, and also the new lapping radial bar feature. Kirk will also do a little demonstration on. And then it'll be coming back to me to look at creating a parts list for miscellaneous products. So we'll kind of go through this fairly quick. It is going to be a high level type overview, so it's not a training session. It's basically just to kind of give everybody a little look and feel of what's out there and the possibilities of what you can use in your day-to-day workflow and process. So with that said, I am going to go ahead and look at getting into the demo side. So this is not going to be a heavy PowerPoint slide type webinar. I basically have, just probably 2 more slides. One of them is this. So I'm going to move into looking at the beam macros. And what I wanted to do for content's purpose is just kind of show, which most folks already know, whenever you get a design from the engineer and what in their schedules, they may say, hey, this beam has 4 number 5s or 4 number 8s bar F type in the top, and then maybe 2 G bars in the top, and then some B and A bars in the bottom. So whenever you look at their schedules, that's typically what you would see. And then somewhere on the plans, you would find a diagram that tells you what an A bar, a B bar, a C bar, D, E, F, G type bar should look like, and what it should do inside of that beam, based off of the spans and then any of the other supports. So that's the only reason why this slide is up, just to kind of give a little bit of context there as far as whenever I'm talking beam macros are in support of the actual design documents and what the engineer has provided. So with that said, I'm going to end the slideshow and I'm going to come straight into Pro Concrete. So inside of Pro Concrete, we have the ability to use beams and reinforce beams. Now, one of the things that we've got in here now is all I'm going to do is just double click this beam reinforcement to bring it back in. And we're going to see that if I look at my longitudinal steel, now I do have to put a caveat in here. This is for ASA users. It is not something from a straight Bentley user perspective that you would see. So I do need to say first and foremost that if you're an ASA customer, this is here for you. So the macros that you're able to select from and also build is available for you. So that is an ASA add-on feature to the Bentley Pro Concrete side of things. So, but what we're going to look at now is whenever we're inside of beam, prior to this enhancement, all we would see is the links. So a user would have to come through and when they're looking at reinforcing a beam, they may have to figure out where the center span of that beam is, maybe make some lines, figure out what my lap length may be, and offset some lines. And, you know, so it's kind of very tedious, where now what you're able to do is through the actual beam macros, you can see and build your beam as needed. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to turn off, just for clarity's sake, the bottom bars. All I'm doing is just taking that B1 bar off the bottom, and I'm just deselecting where it's actually going to be located in the beam. Okay, so now we can see just the top bars. And I am in a plan view. So what I'm going to do is go back to this T1 bar, right? And I'm going to get rid of some of this information so you can see how it gets built out. So right now, I've gotten rid of the right offset, which is basically from the face of that support through the center of that beam. And now all I have is something that says S minus E. Now what S represents, as I'm just going to tab through it, is it's the length of the support. So the system knows, and you can see it's kind of lit up green, it knows that's my support. So it's going to be able to tell how wide that support is and put that information in for you. Now, whenever I add the minus E portion to it, when I look at the defaults, the minus E is actually the edge clearance that I specified for my beams. So whenever I come back and I say that I want support minus E, that's saying support, sorry, caps lock, minus E. I'm going to tab, and you can see it actually brings in my clearance for me. So now I have support minus E, and it brings me up to the face of the support. Now I need to project out into the beam. So if I went back to that previous slide, I knew that the engineer wanted 0.5 of my clear distance, or that span. So I'll just go ahead and tab through that. And we can see it actually puts me, and I'm going to turn off these other bars here so we can see what's going on. So it puts me to my 0.5, or my center of my beam. And then whenever we go back and we say, okay, so now I'm at the center of my beam plus 12 diameter lap, right? So it's going to take the bar diameter that I specified, a number 6, and it's going to say, okay, I need a 12 bar diameter lap, because when we look back at what the engineer was asking for, they wanted 24 diameters at the center, right? So if I have 2 bars that were intersecting, I need a total of 24. So all I'm doing is just taking that number, splitting it in 2, and calling it 12. So I have a 12 diameter lap, and that's going to add my distance required. So prior to the change, once I got done with this information and I put it away, the macros themselves would disappear. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my other top bars back in by just selecting where I want them to go. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my bottom so I can make this beam complete again. So again, I'm just selecting which positions I wanted those bars to be at, and I'm going to save it. So at this point, that beam is saved, it's put away. Now, if I recall the beam in, the nice thing about it is the macros stick. They now show every time, where before it would have converted the S minus E to a length. Now it's actually there for you to make any changes necessary and not have to recall in the whole macro. Now, to speed your process up, like I showed before, we do actually have a way of adding in your macros to predefine them. So if you knew your engineer needed a bar A, bar B, bar C, bar D, you can actually tell them the type, bar A, bar B, bar C, bar D, give them the specific macro you need, And then instead of hitting the plus button to add another bar, you would simply find the macro that you want. Say it's a top left, you would double click it, and then again, just select, well, you got to have a bar size first. So let's say these are number 5s, and then select which position you would want those bars to be placed in, and then put it away. So it is truly that simple to add in, once you have the macros defined, your bars for your beams. Now, what does this do for me? So now that I have the macros in there and I can see them, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put this away real quick, and I am going to turn on my screen number 2, and I'm going to bring in this to my isolate. So I'm going to add to my isolate, and all this is, and I'm only running one screen just for, you know, from a webinar's perspective, it's easier to have just the one screen instead of multiples. On my beam, I'm going to bring it back in. I'm going to say clone, because this beam and that beam is pretty much the same. The macros stick, so it knows that what the size of my support is, what the distance of my span is, and what the size of my support is again, and it's able to utilize those same macros for the next beam. So I can put that away, and if I wanted to clone the next beam over, you know, I can double click it, bring it in, and I can clone it. So truly it is that simple. Whenever you start working with beam macros, spend a little bit of time up front, set your macros, get them right, get them proper, and then as you're working the project, you can simply click through your beams, knowing it's a right end, left end, or a continuous type support. You can make quick adjustments, again, by adding in additional macros, taking them away, putting them in the position that you would want to see them from the beam's perspective, and rolling with it. So the beam macro enhancement to me is a step up from where it was. It is a very good tool to utilize, and especially whenever you have, you know, say you have a large structure, and it's a slab, beam and joist type slab. You're going to utilize those macros over and over and over. So that's it with the beam macro. I'm going to move next into doing the parametric cells. I would urge anyone who has any questions. We do have Jeff and Brian monitoring the Q&A piece, so you can actually ask questions. So I believe on your screen, you should have a question and answer type area. Just simply ask the question, and they'll get back to you with any of the answers as we go through. So I'm going to continue on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to assume that everyone knows already how to create a cell. Now, I plan on doing some additional tips and tricks types of videos that we've been putting out on YouTube, so just keep an eye out for those. And then also, as we're going through the webinar, if there's any tips and tricks that you can think of that you wouldn't mind seeing, we kind of try to keep them under about 10 minutes and just kind of walk through a good tip and trick on how to do things. I would be happy to put those together, either me or Kirk, to help you out and put them and post them out on the web so they're there for you to view. So if you can think of anything, just put them in the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to look at getting those on. So whenever we talk about the parametric cell piece, prior to the last few updates, you could not reinforce a cell. Right, so what you kind of had to do was just incorporate guidelines, and those guidelines you had to convert to reinforcing after you brought them back in. However, now we have that ability to take a cell. So for example, this is just a basic panel cell library that I created. I've only got 3 panels in here, a type O for opening, O with columns, and then a type P. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here, and I'm going to place one. I'm just going to place another. Zoom in here. And we'll place the P panel. So I am able to actually create some templates. And the reason why I'm using panels as a sample is because typically in a panel job, you would have a lot of repetitive type panels, and there is going to be a kind of a template or a basic design. Your panels are standard, 4s at 10 or whatever it is that you've got. You've got typical edge bars, typical opening bars. So there's a lot of typical details, but the difference is your panel sizes may change and things of that nature may be adjusted. So first you would bring in or set up the cells for those typical type panels, and then you're able to bring them in and make adjustments to them. Now, once you bring a cell in, it does come in as a cell. So what we need to do is drop the parametric cell. And so all I'm going to do is just come in and drop it down. So I'm just going to drop all 3 of these real quick. So now I can actually, just like any other reinforcing that we've got, I can come in, I can delete this column, I can come over, I can double click, bring in a column. I can make a change to it. So let's just say I want to do these ties to 135 degrees. It's going to change up on me. I'm going to save it. Actually, let's go ahead and clone it while I'm here. I'll clone it over to there. I'm going to accept it. So I'm able to make changes. I can modify my reinforcing. So let's just grab this handle and just, bring it up a little bit. All my reinforcing changes. So it takes the parametric piece and still keeps everything intact for you to make adjustments. And then once you have it to that point where you've got it, you can come in and start running positioning. I go to concrete, position the bars, position it out. And I know I'm running quickly through this because again, I'm assuming that most folks already have this down. I'm going to come in, just create a section cut real quick, just to show you that once you've got everything the way that you want it, and now I know some folks would argue no one would ever put all the panels on one drawing. This is just for demonstration purpose, but it's just to show you that you're able to do that. You're able to still utilize the Bentley auto label tools, so then you're just simply cleaning up a drawing. If I would have saved it with a rebar off, I wouldn't have had to have done that step. And then it's just a matter of, moving the items where you want it, positioning what you want where you want it, just dragging and dropping, making any changes, cleaning up the drawing, dimensioning, and then placing this straight onto your sheet. So you can see how using a parametric cell could speed up the process of taking that basic design, tweaking it just a little bit, creating the sheet, creating the section, putting it over onto the sheet and moving on. Again, if somebody wants to see, I know we have another video out there, or I've done another webinar where I've used a panel booklet. So we have set up a seed file for a panel booklet. We can obviously utilize the same principle of the parametric cell for panel booklet. It's easy to do. I'd be happy to show that if that's something from a tips and tricks people would want to see, is how to set that up. I'd be happy to do that. Again, apologize for talking fast, just trying to cover as much content as we can. And I think from here, we're going to take, I'm going to turn it over to Kirk, because we're able to take the parametric cells and kind of, we'll take it to the next step is what I guess I would look at it when we talk component center. So we're going to have Kirk show that component center for us right now.
All right. Yep. Thank you, Travis. And especially with the focus on the parametric cells and cells in general, I know, especially for large organizations, one of the main topics or thoughts that come to mind is, one person goes to the trouble of setting up all these cells and makes their life easier, and you hear about it, but nobody ever gets to see the cells, or maybe it's just that location has the cells. How do we get these cells out, make them available to maybe all locations or even remote users, or cloud-based users that you might have? So the component center is kind of the way of doing that, and I think it's a pretty useful feature that Bentley has added to the Connect Center. So if you log into a Connect Center or the connection client here, you should be able to get to the Connect Center, and inside of the Connect Center, so we scroll scroll down here, let's see, we've got the component center, and it does have to be enabled within the user access. So ASA might need to check that for its users, but once you have access to it, all of the components that have been generated or created within your account that you have access to or that you're logged into will be visible. So I assume, you know, all CMC users would be able to see any CMC component that was generated, or, you know, whatever the case may be. And you can create catalogs within this. There's components. You could actually look at the components themselves and do searches in here to locate maybe specific components and view the details of them. Or you could also search by brands that have been uploaded, and you can apply brands to that whenever you're uploading it. So just to give a quick run through of that process. And again, this is still sort of a technology preview. I have tested it on a few different structures and have gotten some decent results, and I can demonstrate those as well. But just to give you an idea of the process of creating that component, what we'll do is inside of a model where we have something that we would like to turn into a component, we can have that modeled, and we only want that element modeled because this entire DGN, the contents of this model right here, are going to be uploaded into the component center. So we want to make sure we just have, you know, the element we want to place as the cell, and also we want to make sure we place that element close to the origin or a distance away from the origin, because whenever we go to place this inside of a file in the future, we're going to be placing it by that origin point. So if we wanted to place this structure maybe by the front here, we would want to shift it back to there. But whatever the case may be, make sure you've got it positioned right and everything's detailed as you might want it, even reinforcement modeled, and variables applied. So in this case, we do have a couple of variations available. If I want to activate those, you can see the effects on the reinforcement and the structure itself, just some kind of typical box culvert options there. But to actually then turn this into a component, we're going to go to the Utilities tab, and all the way down, and I'm on the concrete workflow here, but all the way down at the end, we'll see a little group for Component Center, and we can click on the Upload Component icon here. Give it a minute to open up this dialog, as you see here. And we can give it a name. So let's say test box culvert. I can give it a category if I'd like. So all of these categories would be defined by your organization, or, you know, whichever account you have access to. So let me see, I have structural foundations, the application that it was modeled in, if you'd like to denote it. All of this isn't necessary. It's just helpful in the case that you're wanting to maybe filter down whenever you go to place a component at a later point in time. But you can apply the manufacturer here as well. And then what I find useful are tags. So if I wanted to maybe call this like precast, culvert, stuff that would make it easy for me to do some searches and find it. And then if I want to incorporate this into a catalog, so if we recall from the Component Center here, that very first landing page we get is the catalogs. I can select a catalog to incorporate it into, and you're actually given the opportunity to choose multiple in the case that for whatever reason you want to do that. But just going to scroll down to, let's see here, structural component library. And then I can click upload. So once I've gotten that uploaded successfully notification, I can close out of the uploader. Then there's one more step that I need to go through to make sure that I am then able to place that component in new models. So I need to navigate to the Component Center and find the component that I just uploaded. So let me go to a full screen here, and I am on the catalog. So I'm going to go down to my structural components. I have already uploaded one in here under a different name, but I'm going to scroll down and locate that box culvert. So test box culvert, there it is right here. So I'm going to look at the details of this. And in order to make this available for use, I need to switch it from a draft to a published. And once the status has been updated, I can go back to ProStructures. And let's say I'm going to go to a new file here. So let me go to this other example model I have created. And if I wanted to place a component, I can click on the Place Component icon. It'll open up my Component Center Explorer. And then I just need to locate that catalog or maybe search for the component that I'm looking for. So let me just find Structural Component Library. And this culvert, probably not alphabetical, there it is, test box culvert. And I can look at the properties for it here. I can see there's some variation properties. I can see the design file, any references that were attached. I can see all of the variations. If I want to incorporate all of them, I can. And then to actually place it, I need to select a single variation and place. And then I will do it from a top view here. So make sure I'm in a top view. If I need to do any sort of rotation, I can do that as well, but I'm just going to place it right at that. And we've got some other lines from a leftover element before, but if I were to make any adjustment to it, so right now that's kind of where the technology preview is at, is in the future we're looking to make it so that the rebar will react dynamically to any adjustment that's made to the variables. So if I were to come in, additionally, it would import those variables with it. So another example that might be a better idea here is a pier column that I have modeled up, so like a bridge column. If I were to place this, it does take a moment to download some of the larger files. Let me rotate to a top view here. And choose location. An issue with that component in this instance. But yeah, so again, this is a technology preview, and I have obtained some pretty good results in the past working with utilizing it on placing those large kind of single structure, maybe repetitive elements that you might encounter day to day that you could turn into a component, let's say maybe even to the point that you could define an entire windmill foundation if you're able to apply variables and constraints to dimensions of the solid element. There's no reason to think that you couldn't get to a point where all of those elements would adjust and accordingly dependent upon the settings that you might have applied to it. So next up, we are going to cover the schedule generator updates, but before we get to that, just to kind of switch it up, I'm going to touch base on the radial lapping feature just because it's going to be in the same file. I have some elements kind of mocked up here for us to use and demonstrate on that. So if anybody's familiar with working with the lapping functionality on the rebar modification tab, lap splice rebar, previous to update 6 of ProStructures, if you've attempted to use that on a radial bar or a radially shaped bar, it would give you a pop-up notification saying that that's a feature is not yet available and is under development. Well, it's finally been developed to a point. There are some limitations. We can't go past 180 degrees currently, and we can't change directions on our radiuses. So that's currently the only things that I've encountered. But hopefully we'll get those kind of ironed out in the future. But just to kind of demonstrate this, I'm going to model a set of reinforcement using these 3 guidelines here. You could imagine that this is perhaps maybe like a bridge deck or maybe some sort of radial element that we are reinforcing with longitudinal bars. So definitely over a stock length the bar is going to definitely end up being over a stock length. I'm just using a pad footing that I have placed over here to assign those rebar elements to as the concrete element. But once I have those 3 lines selected and I switch this middle one to an arc intermediate point. Now I can see that the bars are 123 foot 11 currently. And previously, in order to get that to stock lengths, we'd have to actually model these as individual sets, which is quite painstaking. But with the lap splice rebar tool now, we can identify those bars, make any settings we need to define for our stock length, the lap method, and then we can choose to generate the lap either on a line, or if we want to just have it generated automatically, we could do that. So the moment I click that generate lap, you can see now we have a lap created at multiple locations. And if I wanted to stagger those laps, you should be able to obtain that as well. So you see a lap here and a lap here on the next set. Additionally, if we have conical structures, so if we have varying radiuses, radii, can accomplish lapping on that as well. So here we have something just as an example, the bars varying in their radius. And if I then utilize the lap splice rebar tool on this, I'll have the same effect. Including the ability to stagger those laps. So, as you can see. And then finally, it does work with helical radius. So if it's going around and up, so what I have here is just 3 lines, each one at a slant, so kind of resembling maybe like a ramp up. And if I were to utilize the irregular dispatch tool to model that reinforcement, let's try it again. Go 1, 2, 3. So just to give you an idea of that, turn the middle one into an arc intermediate point. If I look at from the top view, you can see the output. That's that. And now lap splice, select my bars, and generate my lap. I think only one lap needs to be generated on this one, but you can see there, the lap is being created for us. Pretty useful, especially in instances like these, to get those bars modeled in relatively quick without having to worry about modeling stock length and then modeling an additional set that's lapping over at the proper locations. All right, and then the schedule generator enhancements. So always working to improve and iron out any kind of bugs or issues that users encounter when working with the schedule generator and adding new features as they're needed. So this upcoming release will have a variety of new features available. If I go to my drawing production tab here and check out the schedule generator. So just right off the bat, I'm going to hop over to the options tab, and we'll see some new options available here for us to define. Right off the bat, we have the ability to define the weight accuracy. So if you're reporting weights on the custom schedule tab, if you don't want that rounded to or if you want it rounded to a, whole number as opposed to incorporating a decimal, you can define that here. We also have the ability now to define a bin cell library. So previously it would just look through your attach or any cell libraries that were found within the configuration. And if a model inside of one of those cell libraries matched the name of a shape that you had in the selection, it would attempt to place that cell. But now we've made it so that you can actually select a cell library within your files, and it will only utilize cells within that library. So if you had maybe customized shapes that you're wanting to define, you could utilize those. And then this is also saved as part of the template, so you could standardize it for your organization. Next up, we have our bar lengths, the ability to display either theoretical or cut length. Had a number of users wanting to show the cut length instead of theoretical, so you can do that now. Some enhancements on the sorting with user marks. incorporating the user mark into that sort method whenever it is applied. So previously it wasn't. Next up, we have the ability to incorporate the concrete's name into the grouping. So previously with the group by concrete owner option enabled, and the radio button here for combine by matching reinforcement, count matching concrete, what it would do is look through your selection that you've made, and for each unique concrete element in the selection, it would figure out what reinforcement was applied to it, and if there were any duplicates or matching sets of reinforcement for other concrete elements, it would summarize those into an individual line and incorporate an additional number, so like a count of 2 or 3, if 3 of them were found. But if you want to incorporate the name of the concrete element into that sorting, you can now enable this last check here. So in the case of, let's say, these two piers, which are pretty much identical in every way, I have one of them named Pier 1 and one of them named Pier 2. And with this checkbox here enabled, I should not have them grouped together. So if I select their reinforcement and load it, and I can use the user marks if I'd like, you can see Pier 1 and Pier 2 are separated. If I remove that check, they are combined because the reinforcement within them is identical. So if at that point I want to maybe say, okay, let's just call them both Pier 1 and be done with it, I could update this name here and it would apply out to both concrete elements, updating them. But if I wanted to make sure to display them separately, I can enable that final checkbox there and get them to break out. All right, next up we have the ability to display parentheses around runout leg dimensions. So this very last checkbox here. In the case that you have maybe like I know it's sometimes used for critical dimensions or something of that nature, but within the shape manager, so the ProConcrete shape manager, let me go ahead and open that up. If you were to navigate in and locate your RSF file that you're using. Go ahead and hit that real quick. We could view the shapes that are within that file and the leg properties and whatnot, but within each shape's properties, we have a variety of options on, for each leg that can be defined. And once I get this file located, here we go. You can see if I were to navigate to any of these shapes, let's say this, we have some S3s out there. So let me place the S3. So I'm going to view edit my S3 here. And let's say that I wanted that C leg. So whenever I populate this bar into my table, I want that dimension to be displayed with parentheses around it. If that's the case, I can view the leg properties for this shape and go to C. And then what I would need to make sure to do is just click that box there for run out. And after I do that, you can see it actually shows it in the preview here with parentheses around it as well. So as long as you have that enabled and then you close and make sure to save, and then you'll probably need to reposition the reinforcement to have those new settings applied to bars that are in the model. But once that's done, whenever you load that into the schedule generator and you have the display parentheses around runout leg dimension enabled, those parentheses will then show up. All right. And then some final things. So especially with reinforcement where you might be trying to sort it by a specific sub heading here. So let's say for our footing reinforcement, if there was a case where I needed a column to be present in order to get a sort I wanted applied, go ahead and N. So let's say I want, for whatever reason, to exclude the rebar label from my placed table, but I want it there visible in this table just so that I could, click on it and sort. You see after I did that click, it sorted them. And maybe there's a case where you're wanting to sort by the concrete name or even the zone, bottom versus top, whatever the case may be. Some of these headers you can click on and sort the data within the table with. But if I right click on any of the headers, you can see there is a item that appears here for Exclude Column. So I can choose to exclude any column from the place table. And I know that it has been applied because the next time I go to right click on that header, it'll say Include Column instead. So you know it's been excluded. Additionally, and it works for either table, the exclude or include. So if you wanted to exclude any column here, let's say the vary code, or maybe let's say that bin number. If I were to place this table and none of my shapes that I have selected are going to make use of a numbered leg, so like an A1 or a B1, that would make use of this bin number column, I could just choose to exclude it. And then I'm saving a little bit more white space on my drawing with this table. Next up, in the case that you have an irregular shape or a shape that does not have or has a leg name that is not included here. So let's say we needed to add a leg M or an N here. If I right click in the table, at the very bottom of the options that appear is add individual leg to table. And then I'll get a pop-up dialog to define that leg name. And so long as it doesn't already exist, it will be added to the table. All right. And just to demonstrate the bin cell library real quick, let me navigate to clear these out and load in my S3 shape. If I have an example available for that, so let me just give you an idea here. So if I were to place a current bin cell, there's my S3. And if I go my bin cell library here and select a different bin cell library, I can go back to that and just place this shape diagram here. See, it's a completely different diagram now. Encountered an issue probably because of the same shared cell there. So in the case that you're placing two cells with the matching name, and you'd probably want to delete that one first, but it would just enable us to place that cell or place a customized cell if we need to. And again, it's probably a good thing to catch because this is an error we won't occur in the future. So whenever y'all get it, it won't happen. All right, Travis, I think that's it for our the rebar schedule generator. You want to?
Yeah, sure will. So I am going to show the last piece here is basically creating miscellaneous products parts list, right? So inside of Pro Concrete, Pro Rebar, we need the ability to kind of show some of the miscellaneous products, which is like for specifically bar supports is what I'm looking at. However, if you have other items that you know, say you're a precaster, you had lifting inserts or anything like that that you needed to, the same process would apply for any product that you need to put on the drawings. Okay, so inside the models. All right, so what we're going to do is if I rotate this, you can see I've got some bar supports. And all I'm going to do for right now, I'm going to turn off my PC rebar just to kind of clean it up so we can see the supports that I have. So all these are labeled as miscellaneous products, right? And they're coming in as a parametric solid from a cell library, okay? So what I've done is if I come in here and I click on one and I go to properties, I've actually included an item type, miscellaneous products, and then I can define what that item is. Now, all I've done is I've done this for one, right? So I've drawn one example of what a 3.5-inch all plastic individual high chair would be. And I've added that item type to it to say, okay, this is what I want to call it and this is what I want to see. And what that gives us the ability to do is if I come in and I go to, and I come into my reports, I can actually now run a report called parts list, and it's going to generate a parts list for us based off of the information that I've given, looking specifically at the item type miscellaneous products. So again, you can create multiple items underneath that product. Or if you wanted to call it a different item type, you can also define that separately also. So, and how you would do that is if I was coming in and I'm going to oops, navigate back over to model. Under here is where I've defined that I've got miscellaneous products. And if I wanted to apply this to another solid, doesn't matter what I draw, I can apply it to another solid, or I can create different things. So let's say miscellaneous products isn't what I want to call it. Let's say I want to have one for bar supports, like individual high chairs, and you can do one that way. You could have another one for lifting inserts, or one for steel plates, or one for whatever you would like, but you can put it in there, then you define what classes you want to call it. And all of this is editable, right? Every bit of it. Again, I think this may be another good tips and tricks type thing that we need to put out just to kind of help people through the process, because it's going to be pretty powerful for you to be able to model out what you want to model and then insert what you need. So I'm going to come in and actually just place a cell. So here's the cell library that I created, right, for supports. And inside here, I've just got just different supports. Now I'm just going to use, for this example, this 3-inch plane, and I'm going to come in. I can place one if I wanted to. So all I've done is just placed one, right? Or if I wanted, I can actually place it, and I'm going to go back to drawing because that's where I'm the most familiar at. So I'm going to go to drawing, and I can place it by a matrix, right? So let me zoom out and just place. So here's your 4-foot spacing, right? So what you may want to do is slap a whole bunch down on the drawing at the 4-foot spacing. You may want to then just move them, position them over a slab or wherever it is that you need them positioned in. And if you needed to slide some around or delete some out, you can, because these are individual cells. And now if I go back and I run that report again, and I say concrete reports, parts list, and I run the parts list, so now you can see I've got the 3-inch plane added to my list. Same thing, I've got beam bolsters, so you can do it for linear footage items. And here, just so everybody can see what it's going to look like, let me change this to something that we can see level-wise. I'm just going to bring it to concrete, and I'm just going to slap this down. So this is what the schedule would actually look like that you could put on your drawing. Close this, get it out of the way. So this is what you would look like. So you're able to put a parts list down onto the drawing. Another thing you can do too is you can actually run a concrete list, so it would see it, by concrete. So that's another piece from a parts list perspective. So if I wanted to go reports, let's say I wanted to run the concrete, right? I could select that and then process it, and then it's going to give me what I've got. Now you can see I didn't name some of the beams up here, but it's going to give me my volume, my weight. So this is just another item that you can slap down on the drawing. So if you're in the precast world, you may want to show some of that to show what the weights are and the volume of concrete. So there's just a whole host of different reports that you can do. Again, they're all customizable. They're very simple to set up. Don't be afraid of them. It is something that is simple to do. And what I'm going to show here, and I'll just show you from a simplicity standpoint. If I come back in and I say, all right, I'm going to we'll go drawing. Drawing. We're going to drop this guy here because it's a cell. I just dropped it down. Now it's individual lines, right? And I'm going to look at the properties because I think, yep. So this one doesn't have an item type attached to it. So picture that you just drawn the item that you want to add as a miscellaneous product, right? And this is how you would add the item type once it's there. So if you're there and you have it drawn, all I'm going to do is go to attach. I'm going to tell it's a miscellaneous product, and then I'm going to click on what I want to attach that item to, close it out. So now if I come back and I look at my properties, I'm going to see an item, miscellaneous, and now I can define what I want that to be. And some of these are just free form. So, we'll just put test in there. Description, we'll just put test support in here. And then, sorry, got a little carried away there. Test support. Then unit of measure. We're just going to do pieces. So now that I have this item type, if I wanted to copy it around, a half a dozen times, I can. And again, if I wanted to create a cell, very simple to do. You're just going to define the origin, create the cell. That item's going to stick with it, and then you're going to be able to repeat this. And so now, if I run the parts list again, so we'll go up to concrete, reports, go back into parts list, and again, I'm just showing as an example here. Now you can see my test is here. So it is really that simple to start adding parts. I would create cells. Those cells are something you can repeat. As you place them on the drawing, you're putting them where you want them, how you want them. They're modeled to the specific parameter, size, diameters, whatever it is that you've got for any accessories. And then at the end of the day, you're able to scan that drawing and run a parts list and put it on the actual drawing so that you can supply that to your contractors or your suppliers or whoever that you need to supply it to. So we are wrapping up, coming up to the end. One thing that I do want to put out there is ASA is putting on a June training session for Pro Rebar Pro Concrete. And this will take you from start to end on how to really get proficient using the product. And again, that's going to be in June. We're currently taking students for that. So if you know of anybody or yourself that would like to be a part of that class, you can reach out to myself and or go to our website to register, and we would love to see and have everyone join who would like to learn a little bit more about Pro Rebar. And then so the next thing is basically going through some of the questions that we have, and we have had a number of really good questions come through. I know that Brian and Jeff have been answering them to the individuals that have been asking. So if you've got any questions right now, go ahead and put them in the Q&A window and we'll look at them. There was one question, Kirk, that someone had, just wondering where and how to access that component center again. So I don't know if you want to
yeah,
just,
I can demonstrate that real quick again.
Yeah, grab that share screen.
Yep. Let's see here. All right, so from the connection client, you can actually access it just from the internet itself. If you were to go to connect.bentley.com and then log in if you're not logged in. And once it's been activated or you're provided access to it, so that's one thing you have to make sure that if you don't see it here, get in charge of whoever is the admin for your account and see what you got to do to get this enabled. I'm sure it's just a checkbox that has to be toggled for you, but you can access it from the kind of landing page here on the Connect Center, from the Component Center down there, or the little menu button kind of hang on the side there. If we scroll all the way down to the My Services group, learn options, so Component Center. And then there was a question in regards to this being available for offline users. So if you do find, maybe you have internet every now and then, but you're going to be going on a road trip and you want to detail, or model while you're away from internet access, and you need some of these components, what you could do is access any of the components that you might need. So let's say if I wanted this component I was messing around with earlier, I can download them, and it's actually just going to download a DGN with that element or all of the elements contained within this component inside of it. So if I were to click the download, I can save it wherever I want. Let's say desktop, save. And then I could either reference it or, I could actually open it up and view it if I wanted to maybe utilize this as a starting point, make some changes to it. Any changes I make at this point are going to be unique to this file. It's not like it's copying it back up to the component center. So if you wanted to use a component that was already there as a starting point, this would be a great way to do it. But this will allow you to have access to those items or those components in the case that maybe you're not going to have internet in the future, or whatever the case may be.
Great. just to remind everybody, go ahead and put inside the Q&A any items, tips, and tricks that you would like to see, especially before we log off, because we are wrapping it up. We've got about 5 minutes left, and so I am going to share back out just as the final screen here, and just first thank everybody for joining the call today. Appreciate it. Hopefully this live event went well for everyone. Again, it was our first shot. Just look forward to doing more of these and hearing from everyone from anything that they're, if you got any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Again, put in that Q&A any tips and tricks that you would like to see. We would love to kind of get those out. We would like your feedback. We'd also like any feedback on the actual demo, if there's things we should do differently or change, or webinar, I'm sorry, and then kind of go from there. But I appreciate everybody's time. Everybody be good, be safe, and look forward to seeing everybody on the next webinar.